It's been 6 months since we began our investigation into the Cadence Theater. Our client Julia Adler discovered the remains of a Broadway actress who disappeared back in 1934. Her board of directors are threatening to pull the plug on the entire establishment, and the NYPD can't spare any manpower to focus on this very cold case. A part of me thinks that this whole thing is a setup, one elaborate internal sabotage, or is there another explanation? Regardless, I will get to the bottom of this. After all, murder is murder, even if the body is covered in cobwebs.
Whether you prefer to work alone or as a group, Hunt a Killer will put your detective skills to the test. With each delivery, you'll sift through documents, evidence, audio recordings, and case files as you eliminate suspects and identify the murder weapon. And if you've exhausted all your leads, you can always turn to a community of over 100,000 fellow detectives to help crack the case. As a fan of the true crime genre myself, I give Hunt a Killer my personal stamp of approval. Right now, you can go to huntakiller.com/unit522 and use my code UNIT522 for $10 off your purchase. Links can also be found in the description.
Join me. You may be able to help solve a mystery.
I had always been told that it was never a good idea to go to the local park at night. I've heard many stories about that place, ranging from homeless people getting into loud altercations to bystanders being assaulted and even robbed. I have to admit that I didn't take these stories seriously and would often go to the park after dark. Normally, I would walk through the park after finishing my lifeguard shift at the community pool. It was a part of my routine, and it always seemed like I was the only one there. Whenever I would make my way through the park, I always noticed the unmistakable smell of marijuana, even though no one was in sight. It was a bit odd, but I brushed it off, not really giving it much thought. On the night in question, I was casually strolling through the park and was approaching the area where I would usually smell the cannabis, and I saw a tall silhouette trailing behind me. I couldn't tell if the figure was a man or a woman because of the distance, but I was creeped out nonetheless. I then saw that the assailant was wearing a V for Vendetta mask, a short skirt, and was brandishing a knife. At this point, my heart was pounding. I then heard the masked figure let out an agonizing scream. The scream didn't sound like it was a female. It sounded like a deranged man. Regardless of what this person identified as, they were wearing a mask and holding a knife and screaming like a fucking psychopath, and I assumed the worst. I bolted, running faster than I ever had in my life. The figure gave chase, picking up their pace once I started running. Once I got to the front door of my house, I nervously fiddled through my pockets, trying to look for my keys. I was in too much panic that I realized that I left my keys in my backpack. I eventually gave up trying to find the keys and started pounding on the door loudly. My dad got angry when he heard the racket, but he understood my sense of urgency once I explained things to him. I can unequivocally say that the 30 seconds I spent waiting by my front door was the longest 30 seconds of my life. I should have listened to the warnings about walking through that park at night. A lesson lived is a lesson learned. This happened back in October of 2016, at the height of the killer clown craze that was going on back then. At the time, I thought nothing of it. It was just a bunch of teenagers looking for a quick laugh by frightening others. I lived alone in a 2-story house. There's about a 3-mile walk between the neighboring houses. It's all separated by tall grass and forest. This detail will be important later on. Halloween night came around, and I was watching Friday the 13th in the living room. The front of the house has a large window overlooking the lawn. It was about 10:55 when Mrs. Voorhees was getting her head chopped off, in the film, and that's when I heard a small but noticeable knock at the window. It made me jump a bit. What the hell? I went over to the window and pulled the curtains back, but all I could see outside was darkness. 10 minutes later, I'm getting ready for bed when I hear a knock at the front door. Now the front door has these long panels of blurred glass. I looked through and saw nothing but darkness. However, a red object appeared in the corner. Wondering what it could be, I changed my angle of view. And I kid you not, there was a fucking clown standing adjacent to my front door, staring right back at me. I jumped back in surprise as the clown fully pressed his face up to the glass. I saw that the clown had a knife in his hand. I grabbed my cell phone to dial 911, and that's when he started pounding on the glass. Hard enough to eventually break it. I ran up the stairs, locked my bedroom door, and got ready to call the police when an incoming call came in from my closest neighbor. Now the phone service in my area is pretty bad. The 2 bedrooms and the bathroom in my house are the only places that you can get good service. I answered the phone, but I couldn't make out anything that my neighbor was saying. His voice was coming in patchy and glitchy. He apparently was in a bad spot for phone service. He said something along the lines that someone just broke into his house. The call then disconnected. I quickly dialed 911 and told him what was going on. As I was on the phone, I heard the shattering of glass from downstairs. The dispatch informed me to stay locked in the room until the police came. I then heard footsteps coming up my stairs, shortly followed by pounding on my bedroom door. That went on for what felt like hours until I heard police sirens outside. The clown then shouted in a creepy, strained voice,
"Oh, you fucker. You just wait."
A flurry of footsteps descended the stairs and out the back door. I came out of the room and met with the officers. I explained everything to them, and how I had received an odd phone call from my neighbor. As I was talking to the officers, my neighbor actually came over. What he told us shocked me. He said that when he called me before, he was trying to warn me that a clown had broken into his house and ran off in the direction of my house. The good news is that the cops ended up catching the clown during their search of the backyard. They brought him around front and placed him into one of the cruisers. They said that they found 2 kitchen knives and a loaded Glock 17 on him. The scariest thing about this encounter is how the clown got to my house so quickly without a vehicle. He left my neighbors at 11:03 and got to my house at 11:05. The next day I got a bunch of texts from an unknown number saying that I was going to die. Since the perpetrator was locked up at this time, I'm guessing that it was an acquaintance of his, which makes me wonder if he acted alone that night. Nothing has happened since, but one thing is for sure. I fucking hate clowns. This happened back in 2012 when I was still attending college. Me and a few friends of mine opted to band together and rent out a 1-bedroom apartment near the campus. We were a bunch of party animals back then, and we wanted our own place, so we could indulge in that lifestyle without worrying about our parents or the school's administration. The apartment complex was located in a rather unsavory part of town. The cops were called out there at least once a week to break up fights or to respond to reports of break-ins. all we ever did there was shower and sleep. Having to overhear domestic disputes and arguing through the walls was just part of the deal. One night my roommates went to a party while I stayed behind to study for an upcoming exam. Aside from some Tupac playing somewhere in the upper levels, things were pretty quiet. It was around 11 p.m. when I heard a strange sound coming from the hallway outside the front door. It sounded like a large metal object being dragged across the concrete floor. There was also a muffled noise, like someone was saying something, although I couldn't quite make out any words. This went on for about 10 minutes, before there came a loud smashing sound. It was at this point that I got up and made my way over to the peephole. At first I didn't see anything, so I just waited to see if anyone would pass by my door. About a minute later, a figure came into view and stood between my door and the door opposite. It was a Caucasian male. Now I will list 3 things that instantly made every alarm bell in my head go off. The man wasn't wearing a shirt and was completely drenched in sweat. There was a large axe in the man's right hand that he was dragging behind him. And last but not least, this deranged individual had on a black leather gas mask that completely hid his face. I was awestruck. This is the kind of thing that you see in low-budget horror movies. This kind of shit doesn't happen in real life. It was a complete shock to the system. As if reading my mind, a creepy, muffled voice then began singing.
Come with me, Hail Mary, run quick, see. What do we have here now? Do you wanna ride or die? La da da da, la 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 la.
As soon as the man finished the verse, he lifted his left leg and heaved the axe into my door. The movement was so fast, it caused me to topple backward. As soon as I scrambled to my feet, I heard another voice from further down the hallway.
Hey, what the fuck are you doing?
I rushed back to the peephole. The masked man was now gone. To the left of my front door was a fire escape, where he was able to make a quick getaway. I then saw the apartment's security guard step into view with his taser drawn. "Hey, do you want me to call the police?" I shouted through the door.
Yeah, if you don't mind. I'm going back outside to cut him off.
I immediately called the police and explained the situation to them. Unfortunately, the masked man managed to evade both the security guard and the police. The complex was surrounded by a small forest, and there was just too many ways for him to escape. After the lease was up, I moved out of that hellhole. A lunatic pacing up and down the hallway outside my door, wearing a gas mask and dragging an axe behind him, while singing a creepy-ass rendition of a Tupac song, was the straw that broke the camel's back. It was a terrifying experience, but I can look back on it now and laugh. I hope you've enjoyed my story. And stay safe out there, guys.
There's always a reason to be afraid.